bright 17-year-old girl, full of ambition and ready to chase her dreams, finds herself handcuffed at the airport gate moments before boarding the flight that could change her life forever. What started as a day of promise quickly spirals into a public nightmare when a gate agent's split-second judgment sets off a chain of events no one saw coming. But there's more to this teenager than anyone at that terminal realizes. Before we dive in, drop a comment telling us what city or country you're watching from, and stick around, because tomorrow's story might just hit even closer to home. Miranda Gilroy couldn't stop pacing. One hand clutched her leather-bound sketchbook like it held her whole future inside it. Which, in a way, it did, and the other thumbed nervously at the strap of her backpack. She wasn't the kind of girl who got nervous easily, but today wasn't like most days. She was 17, a recent high school graduate from Jackson Heights in western Ohio, kind of small town where planes were something you saw slicing across the sky, not something you boarded for summer programs at one of the top engineering schools in the country. And yet here she was. Concourse D buzzed with passengers dragging overstuffed carry-ons and snapping boarding pass photos like it was a vacation. But for Miranda, this wasn't leisure. This was everything. MIT's 6-week pre-college aerospace program, where she'd be surrounded by the kind of minds she had only read about in Popular Mechanics. She had beat out thousands to get here, with essays written late into the night and grades forged in the fire of long study sessions and a deep hunger to fly higher. Her dad had called it her launch pad. She could still hear his voice in her head this morning, calm and proud, the same way it had sounded since she was little. "Miranda, when you get up there, you show them who you are. Don't shrink, don't explain, just be. You already belong." She had smiled and nodded, pretending she wasn't tearing up. But now, in the middle of this bustling airport with its expensive pretzels and screechy loudspeaker announcements, Miranda found her hands starting to tremble. She didn't want to mess this up, didn't want to do anything that might make someone second-guess her place in that classroom. A woman in a blazer passed by, looking Miranda up and down. Nothing unusual, just the kind of look you get when you're a young black girl in a place people don't expect you to be. Miranda ignored it. She was used to that look. She'd learned to be. She pulled her boarding pass from her hoodie pocket. Flight 508, Gate D12. Boston Logan. First class, which her dad had insisted on. It felt too fancy, too loud. But he'd put his foot down, the way he did when he wanted to remind her of her worth. "You worked for this," he'd said. "You deserve to arrive like you matter." Miranda had smiled, tucked the ticket away, and promised herself to walk through that gate with her head held high. She didn't know, of course, that someone else had already decided she didn't belong. Colleen Baxter had worked in the airline industry for nearly 15 years. She wore her polyester uniform like it was a badge of rank, not service. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a bun so tight it made her forehead glisten. Every movement she made was sharp, deliberate, and infused with the kind of authority she didn't always feel, but made sure everyone else did. She noticed Miranda almost immediately, not because she was causing trouble, not because she was loud, but because she looked out of place in a way Colleen couldn't articulate. Something in the backpack, something in the way she hovered, something in the skin, though Colleen would never admit that out loud. She leaned over the gate podium, narrowing her eyes. Miranda's boarding pass had first class printed clearly across the top, but Colleen had seen her kind before. Teenagers with gifted scholarships or rich parents trying to make up for guilt with airfare. They weren't always trouble, but they were unpredictable, and airports ran on predictability. Colleen didn't like question marks. And Miranda Gilroy, standing there alone, shifting nervously in place with that sketchbook hugged to her chest, looked like one giant question mark. Miranda tried not to notice the way the gate agent stared at her. She had seen that kind of stare before. teachers who scanned her essays twice, shopkeepers who hovered too close. She'd learned not to flinch, learned not to give anyone the satisfaction. But still, her fingers tightened around the strap of her backpack. She turned away and walked to the corner of the waiting area near the big floor-to-ceiling windows. Outside, the tarmac shimmered with heat. Planes taxied, fuel trucks hissed and beeped. Miranda sat down and opened her sketchbook. Inside were pages of sleek wing designs, modular engine drafts, and a few odd doodles of herself flying with a cape. She didn't look up again until someone was standing over her. "Excuse me," a voice said. Cold, official, male. Miranda blinked up at the man. He wore dark blue. Police. Another stood behind him. Officer Brent Turner, crew cut, late 40s, pale skin, blank face. He looked down at her like she was a task he hadn't been expecting. "Can you come with us, please?" Miranda's stomach dropped. She looked around. Passengers glanced over and quickly away. No one said anything. "I haven't done anything," she said. "We just need to ask you a few questions," Officer Turner said. "Please, come quietly." Colleen watched from behind the podium, arms folded. Miranda stood up slowly. She clutched her backpack and sketchbook like they were shields. The officers flanked her without touching her, but they didn't need to. The message was loud enough. As they walked, her boarding pass slipped from her pocket and fluttered to the floor. No one picked it up. Down a long hallway and into a windowless room, Miranda sat. Cold metal chair, harsh overhead light, one-sided mirror. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Probably her dad. She reached for it, but Turner stopped her with a shake of his head. "Not until we're done." Done with what? She hadn't taken anything, hadn't said anything, hadn't raised her voice or broken a rule. But that didn't matter in this room, in this place. She looked at her sketchbook in her lap. The edges were bent now. "Can someone tell me what this is about?" she asked, trying to keep her voice from shaking. Officer Turner didn't answer. Outside, the terminal kept moving. Planes landed, families laughed, babies cried. Somewhere, her flight was probably boarding. And somewhere else, her father was wondering why his daughter wasn't picking up the phone. Miranda Gilroy had done everything right. But none of that mattered anymore. Colleen Baxter never liked uncertainty. She was a woman of systems, of checklists and procedure. She trusted her instincts, the way pilots trusted autopilot. Her gut had never steered her wrong, not in all her years handling boarding gates, complaints, flight delays, and every kind of passenger tantrum imaginable. She could spot a liar in 3 seconds, a troublemaker in 2. She didn't need to ask questions. She read people the way other folks read manuals. So when she noticed that girl, standing by the window in a hoodie and jeans, clutching some beat-up sketchpad, something inside her clicked. Not fear, exactly. Not suspicion. It was more like static in the air, a sense that something wasn't lining up. Colleen had seen the type before. Always looked nervous, always alone, always looked at the floor when you spoke to them. Then 5 minutes later, some incident. A missing wallet, a stolen phone, a holdup at security. She watched Miranda out of the corner of her eye while pretending to check boarding passes. Her hands worked on autopilot, but her focus stayed locked. She noticed the way the girl paced, the way she scanned the room like she was tracking escape routes. Miranda wasn't holding a coffee or scrolling her phone. She wasn't FaceTiming friends or flipping through a magazine like other teens. Just standing there, waiting, watching. Colleen's fingers hovered over her radio. She told herself she wasn't doing anything wrong. She wasn't profiling. She wasn't racist. She had black co-workers. She had voted for Obama, twice. She told herself it was just instinct. Just something about the behavior, the posture, the energy. She tapped her radio once. "This is Baxter at D12. Can I get a unit to swing by for a quick visual?" Dispatch answered in seconds. "You have a situation?" "Not sure yet," Colleen replied smoothly. "Just want to get ahead of something." As soon as she said it, she felt a little rush of satisfaction. That was how you stayed ahead in this job. You didn't wait for alarms. You read the signs. You made the calls. Minutes later, Officer Turner appeared like clockwork, flanked by a younger officer trailing behind him. They didn't question her, didn't challenge. Colleen simply nodded in Miranda's direction and said, "She's been hovering around for a while. Gave me some attitude earlier. Might be nothing, but I'd rather you take a look." Turner said nothing, just followed the cue like they always did. Colleen felt herself straighten as she watched them cross the terminal. When they stopped in front of the girl, she tensed. When they escorted her out, she nodded to herself. That's how you run an efficient gate. Colleen turned back to the next passenger in line and resumed scanning boarding passes with a little more confidence in her spine. Miranda sat in the cold, narrow room and tried not to cry. Her throat felt like it had a clamp around it. Her hands were numb. Her head kept replaying the moment those officers appeared in front of her. The walk down the hallway, the stairs, the way people had leaned away like she was carrying something contagious. She wasn't used to this. Sure, she'd been followed in a store before, had teachers assume she was cheating just because her grades were better than expected, but this was something different. This was official. This was law. And no one had told her what she did wrong. The older officer, Turner, sat across from her with a manila folder and a cheap pen. He tapped the pen against the table, while his younger partner leaned against the far wall, arms crossed. "So," Turner said flatly, "you want to tell me why you were lingering at the gate?" Miranda blinked. "I was, waiting for my flight." "You weren't standing in line. You weren't sitting either. You were pacing. You looked anxious." Yeah, I guess I was," she said, heart hammering. "It's my first solo flight. I was just nervous. But I have a ticket. I have a reservation. I wasn't doing anything." "Do you have ID on you?" She reached into her backpack slowly and handed over her state ID. He flipped it in his hand, examined it like it was a forged note. "What's in the backpack?" "Books. My journal. My sketch pad." He nodded toward it. "Let's take a look." Miranda hesitated. It felt like a violation. But she wasn't in a position to say no. She slid the bag across the table and watched as he unzipped it, rummaging through her things like he had every right. He flipped through her journal like it was just paper. Her pages of sketches, notes on propulsion systems, blueprints and flight designs, everything she'd been dreaming about since she was 10. He didn't even look at the details, just flipped, glanced, tossed it aside. Turner slid the bag back toward her. "You traveling alone?" "Yeah." "Where are you going?" "I was accepted into a summer program at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, aerospace engineering." His pen stopped tapping. "What kind of program?" She answered him again, slower. "A 6-week academic residency. I got a scholarship." The young officer shifted his posture for the first time, clearly uncomfortable. Turner jotted something down. Miranda's voice cracked just a little. "Can someone please call my dad? He's probably freaking out. He's the one who bought the ticket. He'll explain everything." "What's his name?" "Elijah Morgan." Turner froze. Not visibly, but something shifted, just the tiniest flinch in his neck. He looked up at her. "Did you say Morgan?" "Yes," Miranda said cautiously. "Elijah Morgan. He's my father." Turner didn't respond. He just stood, stepped out of the room and closed the door behind him. Miranda sat still, her breath shallow. The other officer finally uncrossed his arms. "I don't think you're in any real trouble," he said quietly. "I think this was a miscommunication. Oh. Miranda didn't answer. She wasn't sure if she trusted his tone or pitied it. Outside the room, Turner stood by a phone on the wall, his fingers hovering. He had heard the name before. Morgan. Elijah Morgan. Not just any father, not just any passenger. The CEO of Skyward Airlines, owner of half the aircraft on the tarmac outside, a name that carried weight in meetings he wasn't invited to. A name with a building named after it at corporate. He cursed under his breath and punched in the number given on Miranda's file. It rang once. Then a voice, deep and calm and unmistakable, answered. Elijah Morgan speaking. Turner straightened. Mr. Morgan, this is Officer Brent Turner with Airport Security. I believe we have your daughter in a holding room. There was a situation. There was a pause on the line. Then Elijah spoke, voice colder than any air conditioning in that building. Put my daughter on the phone. Miranda stared at the phone as Turner stepped in, holding the receiver like it might bite him. Your dad. She took it with both hands. Benny. The sound of her father's voice was like a rope thrown into deep water. Miranda, are you okay? No, she whispered. They pulled me out of the line, said I looked suspicious. Silence hung there for a long second. I'm on my way, Elijah said. Stay calm. You didn't do anything wrong. Miranda felt something unclench in her chest, but she also knew, somehow, this wasn't over. Not yet. Elijah Morgan wasn't a man who raised his voice often. He didn't need to. When you built something from the ground up, when your company name was etched into terminals, embossed on tickets, stitched into the backs of leather seats flying across continents, people knew to listen. People responded to the calm steel in your tone, not volume. But as he stepped off the elevator at Lakeview International Airport and marched across the private security access corridor, something in him was starting to crack. His usually careful, measured strides were sharp now, tight. He didn't nod at the airport staff he passed. He didn't stop for greetings or briefings. The only thing on his mind was Miranda. The last time he saw his daughter was 4 hours ago at breakfast. She was fidgeting with the zipper of her hoodie, pretending not to be nervous. He remembered reaching across the table to fix the collar of her shirt, smiling at her like it was just another day. But it wasn't. Today was the beginning of her future. And now she was in a back room with security because someone saw her skin before they saw her boarding pass. Elijah's jaw tightened as he reached the internal checkpoint. Wesley Grant, his head of security and longtime confidant, was already waiting with a badge and a scowl. They pulled her out without cause, Wesley said, pressing a laminated pass into Elijah's hand. No prior incident, no alert, no security trigger. Which officer? Turner. And a call was made from Gate D12 by Colleen Baxter. Elijah didn't need the full picture. He could already see the outlines of it. He knew this story. Too many times, too many variations. He pushed through the door into the inner corridor, flanked by 2 members of Skyward's internal security, not for protection, for authority. When Elijah Morgan walked through an airport, it was like a moving command center. But in that moment, he wasn't a CEO. He wasn't a business leader or a keynote speaker or the man Fortune magazine had once called the new face of American aviation. He was a father, and his daughter had been handcuffed at the gate. Miranda hadn't moved from the chair. Her sketchbook was still on the table, open to a page with a blended wing-body aircraft concept she'd spent weeks refining, one wing curled from the stress of the officer's earlier inspection. She didn't try to fix it. She just stared at it, one leg bouncing beneath the table in short, uneven taps. She'd stopped asking questions. They weren't giving her answers anyway. The younger officer, the one who looked too guilty to meet her eyes, had stopped pretending this was normal. He just stood there, staring at the floor. Turner hadn't come back yet. Miranda was starting to wonder if they were just going to leave her there until the flight had long taken off, her future drifting away above the clouds while she sat in a locked room for what? Existing? The door burst open without warning. Miranda looked up, her mouth parted. She didn't say his name. She didn't have to. Elijah crossed the room in 3 steps and dropped to one knee in front of her. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She shook her head quickly. "No, just shaken." "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry." Then he stood, slowly, and turned. Wesley entered behind him, face unreadable. Behind them, Officer Turner stood in the hallway, watching the scene like someone realizing too late that they'd stepped off a ledge. Elijah faced him fully. "Do you know who I am?" Turner swallowed. "Yes, sir." "Do you know who she is?" "Yes." "Then explain to me," Elijah said, voice low and slicing, "how you ended up putting my daughter in a windowless room, treating her like a criminal, without ever verifying the most basic information first." Turner opened his mouth, closed it again. "It was a miscommunication," he finally muttered. "Is that what we're calling this now? Miscommunication? You looked at a teenager who wasn't doing anything wrong, and instead of asking questions, you escalated. She's 17. She's traveling for an academic program, and you dragged her out in front of everyone like she was smuggling something." "I was responding to a call from the gate agent." "Don't shift it," Elijah snapped. "You had her ID, you had her name, you had the tools to check everything, and you still decided she didn't belong." Turner looked down, his hands clasped behind his back. Elijah exhaled, then turned to the younger officer. "What's your name?" "Officer Martinez, sir." "You were in the room the whole time?" "Yes." "Did she resist?" "No." "Did she make any threats?" "No, sir." "Then why is she still sitting here?" Martinez glanced at Turner. "I'll escort her out myself," Elijah said, voice steady now. Miranda stood slowly. Her knees felt weak, but she straightened her spine, the way her mom used to remind her to do in choir. She gathered her things, her backpack, her sketchbook, her jacket, and walked beside her father out the door. Down the hallway, Wesley walked ahead, clearing the way. Passengers in the terminal turned to stare as Elijah and Miranda emerged into the main corridor. The silence that followed them was heavier than any announcement. Some recognized Elijah. A few whispered. One woman pulled out her phone. Miranda didn't look at any of them. Colleen Baxter froze when she saw them. Elijah locked eyes with her across the gate area. She stood rigid behind the counter, like she was trying to blend into the flight monitors. But there was no mistaking the fear in her eyes. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. But Miranda did. She paused, turned to the gate agent, and said in a voice calm as wind through glass, "You didn't even ask me my name." Colleen said nothing. Miranda walked on. Elijah's private team had already contacted the flight crew. The airline, after all, was his. The plane had been held, a seat reissued, the gate re-cleared. But as Miranda stepped back onto the boarding bridge, she didn't feel victorious. She felt exposed, burned by eyes, scarred in a place no one could see. She took her window seat. First class. The leather still smelled new. The cabin crew offered her water. She declined. Across the aisle, a business traveler in a navy suit gave her a subtle nod. She looked out the window, sketchbook on her lap, and watched the tarmac drift by as the plane rolled back from the gate. Somewhere far below, behind polished floors and reflective glass, the people who had judged her were going back to their routines. But Miranda Gilroy was done being quiet. And this flight was just the beginning. The first 20 minutes of the flight passed in silence. Miranda didn't speak to the flight attendant. She didn't take the snack. She didn't buckle her seatbelt until they were already taxiing. Her mind buzzed, but her body felt frozen, heavy in a way she couldn't explain. The leather seat beneath her was soft, almost cloud-like, but she couldn't sink into it, not after what had just happened. She sat perfectly still, as if any sudden movement would call more attention to her. And the last thing she wanted, after being marched through a terminal in front of strangers, in front of a gate agent who never even looked her in the eye, in front of cops who saw her as a problem before a person, was more eyes on her. Outside the oval window, the ground dropped away, the plane lifted, arcing smoothly into the sky. Miranda didn't look out. Instead, she stared at her sketchbook, which sat unopened on her tray. Its corners were still bent from when Officer Turner had flipped through it like it was trash. She knew they were just pages, paper and ink, but it felt like someone had touched something sacred without permission. The seatbelt sign dinged off. Miranda reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out her phone. 23 missed calls, 11 texts from her dad, a few from Tyra, her best friend back home, who had likely seen something online by now, one from Mason Reed, the program coordinator at MIT, checking in on her ETA. At this point, her team, who they clued by Jump Tech, She didn't respond to any of them. Not yet. She opened her camera instead and stared into it. She looked the same. Same dark brown eyes, same long braids pulled into a bun, same honey-colored skin, but something felt different. Her reflection didn't feel like hers. It felt like a stranger wearing her face, like a version of herself that no longer moved through the world safely. Slow breath escaped her lips. Her fingers trembled. She switched the camera off. Across the aisle, the man in the navy suit was still watching her. She didn't like it, didn't trust it, but his expression wasn't cruel, just curious. She narrowed her eyes until he looked away. Then, finally, she opened her sketchbook. Not to draw, not to work, just to look. The pages held evidence of who she was before all this. Her best Fusilier design, a tilt-wing concept she'd been refining since April, an idea for a hybrid battery fuel cell. She traced the edges with her finger like she was reminding herself that she still belonged in this world, still had something worth building. The seatbelt sign chimed again. A bit of turbulence, nothing major. Miranda turned the page. Behind her, a child kicked the back of her seat once, then stopped. She didn't turn. She didn't flinch. The chaos of the cabin, the plastic crackle of snack wrappers, the low hum of overhead vents, the gentle clatter of carts being wheeled down the aisle, faded into background noise. Her world had shrunk. It was just her and this seat now. She didn't even realize she had fallen asleep until the flight attendant gently tapped her shoulder. Miranda's head jerked up. The cabin was dim now, windows mostly drawn, people whispering, the soft rustle of descent preparation in motion. "Miss Gilroy?" the attendant said, voice kind but cautious. Miranda blinked the blur out of her eyes. "Yeah, there's a gentleman waiting at the gate when we land. He's with the MIT program. Just wanted you to know, so you're not alarmed when you see someone holding your name." Miranda nodded once. The attendant paused. I'm very sorry for what happened back there." It was the first time anyone had said those words out loud. Miranda looked up at her, uncertain. The attendant, a black woman in her 40s with short curls and tired eyes, gave a nod so small it was almost invisible. "I was at the gate," she said. "Didn't see everything, but I saw enough. We don't all get to take the badge off when we clock out. Sometimes the badge follows you, even in your seat." Miranda swallowed. "Thanks," she whispered. The woman smiled softly and moved on. When the plane landed, Miranda didn't rush to get up. She let the others grab their bags and shuffle forward like normal. She waited until the aisle was mostly clear before sliding out her backpack and tucking her sketchbook inside. She stepped off the plane and into the long hallway that led to baggage claim. And there he was, Mason Reed, mid-30s, trim beard, smart glasses, holding a small sign that read, "Jill Stoy," in clean, blocky Sharpie. He looked up. Relief flooded his face. "Miranda, oh, thank God," he said, lowering the sign. "You okay?" She nodded. "Yeah." "You sure?" "Not really." He frowned, stepping aside to let her walk beside him. "I heard something happen. I didn't want to call too much in case you were with someone." "You heard already?" she asked. "It's the internet," he said. "You know how it is. Someone filmed part of it. You haven't checked yet?" "No." He nodded, lips pressing into a line. "It's everywhere. Not your name yet, but I knew it was you." They walked together through the terminal in silence. Mason led her to a waiting car, already arranged by the university. He opened the back door for her. She slid in. Once they were moving, Miranda finally spoke. "Do you think they would have done that if I didn't look like me?" Mason turned in the passenger seat. His answer didn't come fast. "I think," he began, voice careful, "we live in a country where people see what they've been trained to see, and not everyone's training is built on truth." Miranda looked out the window. City lights flickered past like sparks from a short-circuited wire. She spoke without looking at him. "I didn't do anything wrong." "I know," he said. "But it still happened." "I know." The car grew quiet again. When they arrived at the campus dorms, Mason helped her carry her bag up to the check-in table. A few other students were arriving too, laughing, texting, bumping shoulders like it was just another exciting day. It probably was for them, but for Miranda Gilroy, the day had been stolen. No apology from a flight attendant could erase that. No private car or might welcome kit could undo what had happened. But as she stepped into the elevator and saw her name printed neatly on the room assignment list, she held on to one thing. She was here. They tried to take that from her. But she was here. The dorm room was small, clean, and smelled faintly of new carpet and lemon disinfectant. The window overlooked a courtyard where a few early arriving students sat on benches beneath trimmed trees, laughing and swapping stories that had nothing to do with security checkpoints or gate agents with stiff mouths and narrowed eyes. Miranda stood just inside the door, her backpack still slung over one shoulder, as if setting it down would force her to admit she was really here. Mason had left her with a key card, a welcome packet, and a reminder that orientation began the next morning. He hadn't pushed her to talk, and she'd appreciated that. He had simply said, "You made it. Whatever else happened, you made it," before turning and walking back down the hallway, his steps echoing in the dorm's high ceilings. Miranda dropped her bag gently onto the extra-long twin bed closest to the window and sat down beside it. The silence of the room was thick. Her shoulders, which had been rigid since the moment those cuffs clamped around her wrists, slowly started to settle. But the weight in her chest hadn't moved an inch. She pulled out her phone. 52 notifications. The number alone made her stomach churn. Her father's texts were at the top. "Dad, call me when you land." "Dad, are you okay?" "Dad, please don't shut down on me." "Dad." Miranda, answer. "Dad, I'm proud of you. You hear me? No matter what they tried to make you feel, you made it. And I'm proud of you." Miranda's fingers hovered over the screen, then pulled back. Not yet. She opened Tyra's messages next. Her best friend had sent a stream of them in fast bursts, the way she always did when something felt too big to process all at once. "Tyra, what the actual hell happened at the airport?" "Tyra, I saw a clip. Please tell me that's not you in the gray hoodie." "Tyra, Miranda, babe, text back. I will start calling your entire family if you don't." "Tyra, Also, I swear to God, if that woman still has a job by tomorrow morning, I'm starting a petition and tagging every senator alive." Miranda let out a breath that was almost, maybe, halfway between a laugh and a sob. She replied, finally, "Miranda, I'm here, safe, tired." Tyra's response came back seconds later. "Tyra, thank you. You had me pacing. I almost stormed the airport myself. What do you need?" Miranda stared at the blinking cursor in the text box. She didn't know what she needed. Sleep? Probably. A reset? Definitely. Increased defense mechanism? But most of all, she needed to feel like herself again. And she didn't know how to get there from here. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she glanced around the dorm again. The other bed was still untouched, its comforter neatly folded, the desk bare. Her roommate hadn't arrived yet. That gave Miranda some time. Time to breathe. Time to think. She reached into her bag and pulled out her sketchbook. It looked tired now, edges bent, spine cracked. But it was still hers. She flipped to a blank page and stared at it for a long time. Then slowly she drew a simple outline of a plane, not the kind she usually designed with technical perfection, but something rough, symbolic. A single-wing craft, no engines, gliding over a jagged mountain range. The line wobbled at the end. She didn't fix it. She closed the sketchbook and lay back on the bed, her shoes still on, the laces knotted tightly as if unraveling them might unravel something inside her, too. She didn't know how long she lay there before her phone buzzed again. It was a number she didn't recognize. She almost ignored it. Then it buzzed again. A voicemail. Curious now, she tapped play. A woman's voice filled the room. "This message is for Miranda Gilroy. My name is Detective Carla Monroe with Airport Investigations. I've been asked to conduct an internal review of the incident at Gate D12. I'd appreciate a few minutes of your time when you're ready. My number's in this message." Miranda sat up slowly. An investigation? She didn't know what to feel. Hope? Anger? Exhaustion? Her first instinct was to let it go. Just move forward, stay quiet, do the work, earn her place like always. But something inside her clenched at that. Why should she be the one to shrink? Why should silence be the thing she clung to when they hadn't offered her the courtesy of a question? Her phone vibrated again. This time it was a text from her dad. "Dad, I know you don't want to talk yet, but just so you know, I didn't let this slide." The second text followed. "Dad, you weren't just wronged. You were profiled, humiliated, and dehumanized. And someone's going to answer for it." Miranda's heart thudded in her chest. She stared at the screen. The words hung there like a challenge, daring her to meet them, to believe in them. For years, her father had told her stories about the things he had to endure building his airline, being dismissed, underestimated, denied funding, called unqualified by people with half his experience. But he'd pushed through. He'd built something that lasted. She remembered once asking him when she was 12 how he did it. He had looked her in the eyes and said, "I wasn't given the luxury of breaking down, baby, so I learned how to bend without folding." Miranda sat there for a long time, then opened her laptop. The welcome email from MIT had a student portal. She clicked through it half-heartedly, her fingers barely engaging with the keys. Orientation details, dorm assignments, a list of professors she'd be hearing from, upcoming workshops. There it was, Intro to Structural Flight Mechanics, Professor Dean McGuire. She clicked the syllabus open and skimmed it, trying to focus. For a few minutes, the familiar rhythm of learning pulled her back into herself. Equations, lift coefficients, load-bearing distributions. She copied one of the formulas into her sketchbook out of habit, and for the first time since stepping off the plane, She felt something warm flicker in her chest. Not joy, not yet, but something like it. That night she finally texted her father back. "Miranda, I heard from a detective. She said they're opening a case." He replied instantly, "Dad, good. They're going to wish they had stopped at an apology." Miranda, "I don't want to be the face of something. I just want to be left alone." Dad, "I know, but sometimes you don't get to choose whether your name is a whisper or a shout." She didn't know what he meant at first, but as she lay back in the dark, her sketchbook on her chest and the sound of distant voices rising up from the courtyard, she started to understand. She wasn't angry anymore. She was awake. Detective Carla Monroe had worked in law enforcement for nearly 20 years, and in that time she'd learned how to recognize a lie the moment it stepped into her office. She knew how to read posture, tone, hesitation. She could clock bias in someone's voice before they even realized they had any. But when she watched the grainy security footage from Gate D12 for the third time that morning, what she felt wasn't suspicion. It was disgust. She paused the video. There was the girl, Miranda Gilroy, standing near the window, hands tucked into her hoodie, flipping through her sketchbook. No sudden movements, no disturbance, no confrontation. And still, in came the officers, summoned by a radio call that had no foundation except for what the gate agent felt. Carla leaned back in her chair. She rubbed the bridge of her nose and sighed. The room was silent except for the low hum of the HVAC and the occasional crackle of voices from dispatch down the hall. The air smelled faintly of stale coffee and disinfectant, but Carla had stopped noticing those things years ago. She clicked back to the audio log. Colleen Baxter's voice came through, clipped and clinical. "Gate D12, requesting a unit for a visual. We have a suspicious individual lingering in the waiting area. Could be nothing, but I'd rather you take a look." There was no mention of threats, no mention of behavior, just suspicious. Carla had heard that word too many times. It always wore a different mask, but underneath it, the meaning was almost always the same. She jotted a few notes on her legal pad and stood. It was time for a conversation. 20 minutes later, she was sitting across from Colleen Baxter in a back office near the employee locker rooms. The gate agent looked nervous, just enough to crack the veneer of her crisp posture. Her eyes flicked to the badge on Carla's chest, then back down to her hands, which fidgeted in her lap. "I understand you were the one who radioed airport security on the day in question," Carla said, voice even. Colleen nodded. "Yes. I thought something was off. Off health." She looked out of place, standing there, pacing. She wasn't sitting like everyone else, just looked tense. Carla raised an eyebrow. "She was traveling alone?" "Yeah." "A valid ticket?" "I hadn't checked yet." She hadn't approached the podium. "So you didn't speak to her at all before calling security?" Colleen hesitated. "No." Carla nodded slowly, folding her hands on the desk. "I'm curious, Ms. Baxter. What made her stand out? Was it the hoodie, the sketchbook, the fact that she was traveling alone?" "I don't know. It was a gut feeling." Carla leaned forward, just enough to close the distance. "Was it also your gut that told you she didn't belong in first class?" Colleen's mouth opened, then shut. "I don't have a bias," she said, a little too quickly. "I treat everyone the same." "Then how did you treat this 17-year-old girl?" Silence. Carla let it hang. Then she stood. "We'll be reviewing your actions further. You may be asked to take administrative leave until this investigation concludes." Colleen looked like she wanted to argue, but no words came. Carla left the office and stepped back into the hallway, her boots clicking softly against the linoleum. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a text from Wesley Grant. "Wesley, Elijah Morgan wants to speak with you. He's on site today for an operations check." Carla didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked down the corridor toward her own office, her thoughts spiraling. She hadn't known the girl was Elijah Morgan's daughter when the report first crossed her desk. That name, Gilroy, had seemed familiar, but not in the way that sparked recognition. It was only after pulling the file and matching it to the Airline database that the pieces began to fit. She'd nearly dropped her coffee when she saw the parent information. Elijah Morgan, CEO, billionaire, founder of Skyward Airlines, a man who, by all accounts, carried himself with calm precision and never showed his anger in public. But when he spoke, people moved. People listened. And now his daughter had been detained in his own airport. Carla reached her office, opened the door, and sat behind her desk. She exhaled deeply, then dialed the number Wesley had sent. "Elijah Morgan," came the voice, calm and clipped. "Mr. Morgan, this is Detective Monroe. I'm overseeing the internal review of your daughter's detainment." "I appreciate you calling," he said. "How much do you know?" "Enough to know your daughter did nothing wrong," Carla said plainly. There was a pause. "She told me she didn't want to make it a spectacle," Elijah said. "But I told her something she didn't want to hear. That being quiet doesn't protect you. It just lets people keep doing what they've always done." Carla nodded, though he couldn't see it. "She's brave," she said. "She shouldn't have to be," Elijah replied, softer now. They spoke for a few more minutes, Carla assuring him that the review would be thorough, that the footage was being archived, that Officer Turner would be scheduled for a separate interview. After hanging up, Carla sat in silence. She didn't know Miranda personally, but she knew hundreds like her. Black girls who were taught to be perfect because the smallest crack would be used against them. Girls who walked with their shoulders drawn in. Girls who apologized before they even understood what they were being accused of. She remembered herself at 17, wearing hand-me-down clothes, sitting in classrooms where teachers mispronounced her name and graded her twice as hard. She remembered walking into department stores and feeling the heat of the security guard's eyes at her back. That weight stayed with you. Carla picked up her phone and found Miranda's number. She'd left one voicemail already. Now she typed out a message. "Miranda, I'm conducting an official review of your detainment. I'd like to speak with you when and if you're ready. I promise to make space for your voice in this, not just your name." She hit send. Then she turned back to the security footage. She hit play, and the grainy video rolled again, frame after frame of a quiet girl in a hoodie, waiting to board the flight that was supposed to carry her toward her future. And behind her, the heavy machinery of a system that had tried, for a few moments, to bring her crashing back down. Elijah Morgan didn't lose his temper, not in boardrooms, not in briefings, not when headlines spun his words, and certainly not when Wall Street doubted his leadership. Control was currency in his world, and he was never short on it. But the silence in his private office that morning didn't feel like control. It felt like pressure pressing down on his chest. The storm had broken. He leaned back in his chair, the skyline of downtown rising beyond the glass behind him, and watched the muted news feed scroll across the television mounted to the far wall. Teen detained at airport gate without cause. Outrage mounts as video goes viral. His daughter's blurred face was frozen mid-action on screen, one still frame pulled from the video some bystander had taken, her shoulders hunched, sketchbook clutched tight. Officers flanking her like she was a threat. The footage had hit social media like gasoline to flame. Elijah had expected fallout. He hadn't expected it to move this fast. The knock came at the door. Wesley stepped in, jaw tense, tablet in hand. "It's not slowing down. Multiple outlets picked it up this morning. A few verified accounts are connecting the dots already." "Aimed yet?" Elijah said. "No, but that won't hold." He nodded. "We issue a statement. General at first, not too defensive. Acknowledge there's an investigation underway. Then we prepare a second response for when, he paused, for when Miranda decides what she wants. Wesley tapped the screen. Already drafted one version, keeping it neutral. I didn't mention her by name, but it leaves room to pivot once she's ready to speak if she chooses to. Elijah stood and crossed to the window. The city stretched out beneath him, orderly, built, constant. Planes dotted the sky in the distance, too small to hear. He watched one arc upward and vanish into the haze. "She hasn't responded to my last message," he said quietly. "She's processing," Wesley offered. "She shouldn't have to process this. She should be building wind tunnels and running simulations and worrying about midterms, not trauma." Wesley didn't reply. There was nothing to say. Elijah turned back, expression hardening. "Has the agent been removed from duty?" "Yes, placed on administrative leave this morning. HR's investigating now. Internal review panel opens tomorrow." "And the officer?" "Turner's union is already circling wagons. But Detective Monroe's report should be enough to open disciplinary proceedings. She's solid." Elijah nodded once, slowly. "She's also the only reason I didn't bring this whole airport to a halt yesterday." Wesley raised an eyebrow. "I was this close to grounding every skyward flight until they issued a formal apology. But Miranda," he exhaled, "she didn't want revenge, she wanted peace. She's stronger than most. She always has been." There was a long pause between them. "You know what the board's going to ask," Wesley said carefully. "They'll want to know if you're going public about who she is." "Not yet. They'll say it looks like we're hiding it." "Let them," Elijah said, voice cold now. "Let them speculate. My daughter's humanity isn't a PR move." Wesley nodded once. He knew when to back off. But the decision loomed large. The company wasn't just any airline. It was a symbol. A rare, black-owned legacy brand in an industry still run by old money and older names. If it came out that the CEO's own daughter had been profiled, detained, and humiliated in his terminal under his banner, the questions wouldn't stop. Neither would the scrutiny. Elijah had prepared for a lot in his career, but nothing had prepared him to see his child treated like that, not by strangers, not by people in his own house. His phone buzzed on the desk. A message from Miranda. "Miranda, you don't have to protect me from this." Elijah stared at the screen. For a moment, he didn't move. Then another message came in. "Miranda, they need to know who I am, not because of you, because of me." He sat down. Reread the texts. Then he looked at Wesley. "Prepare the second statement. We're going public." An hour later, the second message went live. No hashtags, no trending bait, just a simple image. Miranda's first sketchbook drawing from when she was 9. A stick figure plain with a sun in the corner and her name scrawled in bubble letters beneath it. The caption read, "The girl in the video is my daughter. Her name is Miranda Gilroy. She's a future aerospace engineer. She did nothing wrong." That post spread faster than any algorithm could handle. Celebrities retweeted it, journalists latched on, professors, engineers, scientists, students, voices that usually never collided, converged on one story. And suddenly, it wasn't just about one girl at one gate. It was about all the gates she represented. Back in her dorm, Miranda scrolled through the explosion of reactions with a kind of stunned silence. Tyra was live texting updates from Ohio, freaking out in all caps. Her phone buzzed constantly. Messages poured in from classmates, teachers, people she hadn't spoken to in years. But she didn't answer them. She just stared at the screen as people dissected her face, her hoodie, her name, her story, praising her, defending her, questioning her. It felt strange to be seen this much. Too much, and still not enough. She stepped outside, needing air. The MIT campus felt hushed, the green spaces open and quiet. A few students sat under trees, reading, charging their laptops. No one stared. No one said anything. She sat on a bench beneath a tall elm and watched the leaves rustle. The wind carried the sound of a plane passing overhead. She looked up. For the first time in 2 days, she let herself breathe. Her name was out there now, not just as a headline, but as a person. A daughter, a builder, a future, a nearly unlimited power. And no matter how loud the world got, she knew something else now. Something they couldn't unteach or unsee. She was not a footnote in someone else's story. She was the headline. And she wasn't done. Miranda didn't expect the cafeteria to go quiet when she walked in, but it did. It wasn't a dramatic movie scene hush, just a subtle shift. The kind you only notice when you're already carrying something heavy. Conversations paused for a breath. Heads tilted. Whispers circled the edges of the room like a breeze through tall grass. No one pointed, no one stared long. But she felt it all the same. Her tray was nearly empty. Just a water bottle and an orange she didn't feel like peeling. She hadn't slept much the night before, even after the whirlwind online. Her name was trending. Her face was attached to too many think pieces. She had seen her story told in a dozen different ways, some accurate, some twisted, none of them really hers. Now, sitting alone at a long polished table near the window, she watched the sun paint lazy stripes across the floor. Her sketchbook was in her lap, unopened. She didn't draw when she felt exposed. Across the room, a student got up, then another. A few more peeled off from their tables and walked toward her, not aggressively, just intentionally. Miranda tensed. The first one to reach her was a tall, awkward-looking guy with wild curls and nervous energy. "Hey," he said, clearing his throat. "I'm Sam. I saw your interview. The clip, I mean. I just wanted to say, that was messed up. What they did." Miranda blinked. "Thanks." A girl with box braids and a NASA sweatshirt stepped up next. "They tried to make you a cautionary tale. You turned it into a blueprint." Another one chimed in. "You're like all over the aerospace subreddit. People are talking about your work, not just the video." Miranda felt something shift inside her. Not pride exactly, not relief, but recognition. They weren't here to pity her. They were here because they saw her as something else now. Something solid. "Want to sit with us?" Sam asked. Miranda hesitated, then nodded. And just like that, the tension in the room began to melt. By the end of lunch, she'd laughed twice. Small, quiet chuckles that surprised even her. And traded numbers with a girl who shared her interest in vertical launch systems. It didn't erase what happened, but it loosened something inside her that had been clenched since the cuffs clicked shut. Later that afternoon, she walked across campus to the tech building for the first real lecture of the summer program. She found a seat near the back of the lecture hall, letting the hum of excited voices surround her. Students buzzed with anticipation, laptops booting up, notebooks ready. She caught fragments of conversation. Someone mentioning Elon Musk, someone else criticizing outdated turbine models. It felt like home in a strange way. Like walking into a place where her thoughts had been living before she ever arrived. The professor entered, Dean McGuire, tall, silver-haired, with a voice like gravel and a posture that demanded attention. "Let's talk about what keeps a plane in the air," he said, tapping the whiteboard. "It's not magic. It's not hope. It's lift." Miranda sat straighter in her seat. "Lift is the force that pushes up against gravity," he continued. "And it doesn't happen by accident. It's earned. Through design, calculation, risk. You earn lift by challenging everything that tries to bring you down." He didn't look at her. didn't reference her story. But somehow the words struck deeper than he could have known. Miranda opened her sketchbook. Not to draw, to write. She jotted a phrase she hadn't thought of before. Lift only exists in motion. It felt right. Felt true. When class ended, the professor called her name. Miss Gilroy? She walked down the steps of the hall, backpack swinging lightly. I've read your application packet, McGuire said. Your sketches are advanced. Your calculations on ducted fan systems, impressive. Thank you. He studied her for a moment. You've got something to say. Don't let noise drown it out. I won't. He nodded once, then turned away. She stepped back into the summer air, the sun now beginning to dip behind the buildings, casting everything in gold. Her phone buzzed again. A new voicemail. This one was from Detective Monroe. Miranda slipped her earbuds in and played it. Miranda, it's Carla Monroe. I wanted to give you an update. The review board convened this morning. The gate agent has been formally placed on suspension. Officer Turner has been reassigned pending a hearing. There will be a public report next week. There was a pause in the message. None of that undoes what happened to you, but if you're ready, I'd like to meet in person. Not for statements, just to talk. My office door is open. The message ended. Miranda stood still for a long time, the words circling in her head. People were starting to move because of her. Not just her father. Not just social media. Her. She hadn't set out to start anything. But something had started. She looked up at the sky. A plane cut across it, leading behind a soft, white trail that slowly disappeared into the blue. Miranda smiled. Then she turned and headed back across campus, the sketchbook tucked under her arm, and the air beneath her feet feeling just a little bit lighter than it had that morning. Miranda stood outside the small glass building that housed the campus media lab, her reflection staring back at her in the doors. Behind the glass, students bustled about, setting up lights, checking soundboards, adjusting cameras. She wasn't here for a class or assignment. She was here because she'd said yes, finally, to a conversation that she had avoided for days. Not the viral interviews, not the press requests her dad had filtered, not the TV offers that made her stomach twist. Just one student-run podcast. The host's name was Dina, a journalism major from Baltimore who wore her hair in a messy bun and her purpose like armor. She had reached out 3 days ago saying, I don't want a scoop. I just want to listen, if you ever feel like talking. Miranda had nearly deleted the message. But something in Dina's tone, casual, calm, patient, felt right. No headlines, no flashbulbs, just space. Now she hovered by the entrance, unsure if she wanted to open the door after all. She tugged at the sleeve of her hoodie. A different hoodie now, bright red with her father's Airline stitched small on the cuff. Skyward. The irony wasn't lost on her. Inside, Dina spotted her through the door and waved. Miranda flinched, then smiled faintly and stepped in. Hey, Dina said, crossing the room. You made it. Barely, Miranda answered, her voice dry but steady. Dina led her to a small recording booth in the back. Warm lighting, 2 microphones, and a small window looking out into the control room where one student sat monitoring levels. Nothing flashy, nothing performative. Just you and me, Dina said, gesturing to the chair across from her. No tricks. Miranda slid into the seat. She took a slow breath, let it out. You can stop any time, Dina reminded her. And if you want to skip questions, that's cool. You lead. Miranda nodded. The red recording light flicked on. Welcome back to Grounded Voices, Dina began, voice calm and clear. Today we're speaking with Miranda Gilroy, a student in the MIT Summer Aerospace Program, and someone who, just last week, found herself in the center of a story that went viral around the world. Miranda didn't flinch. Dina continued, "But we're not here to retell that story. We're here to hear her story, from her mouth. Miranda, thanks for being here." "Thanks for asking me." Dina smiled. "I'll start simple. Who are you when you're not in the middle of everyone's timeline?" Miranda blinked, surprised by the question. Then she smiled too. "Just a little. I'm a daughter. I'm an engineer in training. I'm a night owl who overthinks. I sketch planes when I can't sleep. And I really hate oranges." Dino laughed. "Noted." They talked for a while, about Miranda's love of flight, her earliest memories of visiting hangars with her father, building little foam gliders as a kid and throwing them off stairwells. She described the way her mom used to cut her sandwiches into little plane shapes on lunch days, and how she'd once gotten in trouble in middle school for calculating drag coefficients during homeroom. Then Dina asked gently, "Can we talk about the airport?" Miranda nodded, slower this time. "I was just standing there," she said. "That's the part people forget. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't causing trouble. I wasn't even near the counter. I was just standing." Dina didn't interrupt. "I remember how the security guy looked at me," Miranda continued. "Not like a girl, not like a student, just like a problem, like he'd already decided who I was before I opened my mouth." She paused. Then came the handcuffs. Her fingers moved unconsciously, brushing her wrist. "I didn't even cry," she said. "Not until later. I just kept thinking, they don't see me, not the me I am, not the one with a scholarship in my bag and an acceptance letter in my hand, just a threat." Dina's voice was gentle. "What did that moment take from you?" Miranda thought for a long time. "Trust," she said, "in people, in places, even in the sky for a bit." "And what did it give you?" Miranda's voice surprised even herself when she answered. "A voice." The room fell quiet for a beat. Then Dina leaned in. "And now that you have that voice, what do you want people to hear?" Miranda didn't hesitate this time. "That I'm not the only one. That there are kids who don't have COs for dads. Kids who get cuffed and questioned and don't go viral. Kids who disappear into systems and get turned into statistics. I want people to stop pretending this is rare." Dina nodded slowly. The interview wound down soon after, but something had shifted in the air between them. Miranda left the booth not as a victim or a headline, but as a storyteller. And her story wasn't finished yet. Outside, the campus was quiet. Evening was setting in. The clouds drifted overhead, soft and low. Her phone buzzed. A text from her father. "Dad, listen to the podcast. You sounded like your mother." Quiet fire. She smiled, tears pressing at the edges of her eyes. She stood on the lawn for a long time after that, sketchbook under her arm, watching planes draw invisible lines across the darkening sky. She was still afraid sometimes, still unsure, but she knew this now, and the world tried to define her by one moment of silence and steel. She would answer back with lift. The sound of her own footsteps echoed softly through the polished terminal floor. Miranda walked slower than usual, not because she was nervous, at least not in the way she used to be, but because every step in this space felt layered now, weighted. She had returned to Lakeview International for the first time since the incident, not because she wanted to, because she'd been asked. The Airport Board of Conduct had called a special review panel. One of their internal members requested that Miranda come in and speak, not to testify formally, but to give context. A voice, they said. Her voice. Just a few words, nothing recorded, no press, no crowd. Just her and a room full of people who now had no choice but to look at her. Her father had offered to come. So had Mason. But Miranda told them both no. She needed to walk this one alone. As she passed the very gate where everything had happened, she paused. Gate D12. It looked smaller now. Just a few rows of black chairs, a counter, a signboard announcing a flight to Denver. People sat in the same places they had that day, heads bowed over phones, scrolling, texting, waiting. Life kept moving here, but her memory held still. She stepped off to the side, near the wide window where she'd once stood sketching a fusillade. Her fingers touched the glass. Cold. She stared out at the tarmac, the flat horizon, the long stretch of runway, and then she whispered, "I'm still here." She turned and made her way toward the administration wing. A security officer recognized her and opened a staff door without asking questions. No badge check, no hesitation, just a soft nod. Maybe respect, maybe guilt. She didn't need to know. Inside the boardroom, the air smelled like coffee and carpet glue. The long table was lined with people in suits, a mix of airport executives, HR officials, security leads. A few looked at her like she was fragile. A few looked like they expected her to scream. One woman at the end, an older black woman in a navy blazer with silver bangles, just nodded once in quiet solidarity. Miranda took the seat at the end, no microphone, just a chair and silence. "Miranda," the chairman said, clearing his throat, "we understand this is an unusual request. You don't owe us this. But we wanted to hear directly from you, not from reports, not from social media." She studied him. Older, white, conservative tie. Probably didn't grow up with people like her. Probably never thought he'd have to ask someone like her for anything. Miranda folded her hands on the table. "I'm not here to retell what happened," she said softly. "You already know what happened. There's footage, transcripts. You have the officer's version, the gate agent's report." The room stayed silent. "What you don't have," she continued, "is what it felt like, what it does to someone, not in the moment, but after." She took a breath. Her voice didn't shake. "I stopped wearing hoodies for a week. I couldn't walk through my dorm lobby without checking behind me. I skipped breakfast for 2 days because the dining hall felt like too many eyes." No one interrupted. "You think it ends when the cuffs come off? It doesn't. It sticks to you like smoke, like it's still wrapped around your wrists, even when your hands are free." A man down the table shifted, uncomfortable. "But I'm not telling you this because I want your pity," Miranda said. "I'm telling you this because you run a system. A system with rules. And whether you admit it or not, that system decided I didn't belong before I opened my mouth." She leaned forward just slightly. "I do belong, and not just because my father owns an airline, not because of my grades or my designs, but because I'm a person." "That should have been enough." The older woman at the end nodded again, eyes shining. "I don't want anyone fired to make me feel better," Miranda added, "but I want this system to be better. I want you to look at your training manuals and your policies and your gate procedures and ask yourselves, what do they teach people to see?" She stood, not waiting for a cue. "And who do they teach people to fear?" No one moved for a moment. Then the chairman rose. Slowly, the others followed. "Thank you, Miranda," he said. His voice had changed. Not louder, but smaller. More human. Miranda turned and left the room. Out in the hallway, the officer who had walked her in was waiting. "You handled that like a storm," he said. "Quiet, but you moved everything." She didn't smile, but her eyes softened. "Thanks." As she stepped back into the public terminal, the afternoon sun poured in through the skylights. People moved around her, boarding flights, hugging hellos and goodbyes. No one looked twice. And that was the point. She wasn't a headline today. She was just a girl in an airport, passing through. But even now, with no cameras and no crowd, she carried something behind her eyes. A quiet fire. Sections, the kind that doesn't burn down buildings. It builds runways. The wheels hummed beneath her as the plane taxied down the runway, the sunlight glinting off the wings outside her window. Miranda leaned her head against the cool pane, watching the tarmac blur into motion. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was waiting for something bad to happen. She felt still inside, the kind of stillness that comes after a storm has passed and everything is washed clean. The flight attendant gave the safety briefing. Miranda didn't tune it out like she used to. She watched the way the woman moved, how every gesture was smooth and practiced, how the words held calm even in their repetition. There was something comforting in the routine of it. An approximate cost saving of 0.4 to 0.8. This flight wasn't to an interview, not to a press meeting, not to a tribunal or a hearing or a confrontation. This was hers. Skyward Airlines Flight 617, direct to San Diego. Her father had offered to send the private jet. She had said no. She wanted to be in the sky like everyone else, to board through the same gate, to fasten her seatbelt in a regular seat, to lift off the same way all dreamers do, 1 inch at a time. As the engines roared and the plane tilted back into ascent, Miranda let her eyes close. She felt her chest rise and fall. Her sketchbook was on her lap, open to a blank page. A mechanical pencil rested in her hand, not yet moving, not out of fear, but because she was thinking, dreaming, actually, about what she wanted to build next. The world had looked at her and tried to define her by a moment of humiliation. It had tried to make her small. But what it didn't realize was that Miranda Gilroy had never been small. She just hadn't stretched her wings yet. A week had passed since the review board's meeting, since her words echoed in that conference room and left something irreversible in their wake. Policies were under revision now. The training program for all gate agents was being overhauled. Security staff were attending new bias intervention workshops, and though no single law could undo what had been done, a shift had begun. People were watching, listening. Miranda didn't want to be a symbol all around. But she didn't mind being a spark. Back at school, her classmates had started calling her the pilot. Not because she could fly planes yet, but because she had steered through something no one her age should have had to, and somehow still kept her course. Tyra had visited last weekend. They stayed up until 3 a.m. eating popcorn in the dorm and making fun of every TikTok think piece that claimed to know her soul after seeing one clip. When Miranda said she didn't want to be known just for that gate moment, Tyra looked her square in the face and said, "Good, then write the rest yourself." So Miranda had. Her final assignment for the MIT summer program hadn't been a blueprint. It had been a concept pitch. Something revolutionary. A new kind of wing architecture that adjusted shape mid-flight to adapt to weather changes in real time. Inspired by birds, simple on paper, breathtaking in theory. Her professor had pulled her aside after her presentation. "You've got something," he'd said. "Keep building." The plane evened out above the clouds. Miranda opened her sketchbook and finally began to draw. Not a plane this time. A campus. A place. A building. A center for young engineers like her. Girls who didn't see themselves in textbooks. Kids who asked questions that made teachers uncomfortable. A space where invention and identity weren't in conflict. She sketched classrooms and labs. She wrote the words, "Aviation belongs to everyone," across the top. It was only an idea, but it was hers. She flipped the page and began outlining a new drone concept, one that could deliver emergency medical kits to rural schools after natural disasters. Her pencil flew now, the lines curved. Lift, thrust, control. She didn't hear the man beside her until he cleared his throat. "Excuse me," he said, smiling politely. "That's incredible work." Miranda looked up. Middle-aged, business casual, soft eyes. "Thanks," she said. "You a student?" Kind of. Just wrapped up a summer program." "You headed to San Diego for school?" "No," she replied, closing her sketchbook. "For opportunity." He smiled again, intrigued, but didn't press, just nodded. "Well," he said, turning back to his paper, "I hope the world's ready for you." Miranda looked out the window once more. The clouds spread endlessly beneath them, like a runway of light. Down below, someone was walking through their own storm, unaware they'd soon hear her name. That a 17-year-old girl once stood at a boarding gate, handcuffed for standing still. That the girl didn't disappear, didn't break. She flew, not because someone gave her permission, but because she refused to wait for it. And now, finally, Miranda Gilroy was cleared for takeoff.